you're in a company where the global CEO is an Indian. He's a Mr. Kapoor. You're a Mr. Kapoor. Do you have a Mr. Kapoor policy in your company? Are there any Kapoors and would
Yeah,
like
we
to
gladly hire anyone who's a Kapoor, yeah.
But on a very serious note, what is it that about Indian managers that we're producing global leaders and we're producing them every week, every month? We hear an Indian manager really taking the top.
I think there are basically three things, right? This is a question, as you can expect, that's asked every time, an Indian becomes senior in any global organization. I think the first thing is reputation, right? The reputation of corporate India for the last 30, 40 years globally has been extremely strong, right? Which is people understand that here is a cadre of people, if you like, that are well balanced, they're well educated, they don't make decisions impulsively, they're analytical, they could yet be risk-taking. I think all of that definitely comes into play in terms of, the mental connect that somebody makes when they're evaluating an Indian manager. But, what is it that Indian managers do that make them well-respected? I think two things. One is definitely mental agility. I think the ability to deal with different situations, especially chaos, is highly pronounced.
To create chaos,
right?
or deal with chaos?
To do both.
Okay.
Right? To do both. Right? So sometimes actually there's a lot of growth that can come from creating chaos as well. So their ability.
We're not talking of Rahul Yadav. He got fired.
Okay, yeah. I don't know whether he's back in or he's still out, but yeah, we're not talking about him. So that's, definitely mental agility, right? The other is cultural agility.
Right.
And of course, a whole lot of elements come into play over here. The first being comfort with the language. English is a very powerful way of communicating, across the business world. And we have that advantage, I think, also in terms of being able to adjust to many different management cultures, to not really impose your style without understanding, what will work. All of that comes into play. So, and then, at the end of the day, it's results, right? So if you see, people delivering and basically they keep delivering, they will keep doing well.
Absolutely.
But by the way, Indians are not the only smart people in the world, is my learning, right? I can tell you that there are many different, managers from around the world, many different countries, very successful, and we just have to keep on our toes.
So if you had to advise the CMOs and the leaders in this room, two things they could do differently to get superior results, because you worked abroad, right? You worked in a different cultural context, let's say the expectations were different. What have you learned there that you could advise the audience in this room that Indian managers could do two things differently to get superior results?
I don't know whether they need to do anything differently. I mean, in fact, my early experience of moving from India in my first assignment was, we try to change a lot, thinking that what's been successful for us in India may not be successful somewhere else, and it never pays, because you are good at what you're good. So,
Sure.
Stick to your strength. And actually, I would say, whether you're in India or anywhere else in the world, what does it take to be a really successful person? I believe there are just two things. Have new ideas, keep trying new things, right? And execute mercilessly, right? So if you have an idea that you want to make happen, make it happen. Make sure that there is a lot of intensity and energy behind it. It is not going to happen basically by saying, here's the idea, let's walk out of the room and sometime or the other it will happen. Make it happen. And then, by the way, the last thing I would add is, never be afraid to think that, if something has failed, you failed. Something has failed, switch it off, move on to the next thing, find the next big idea. But it's a cycle. Idea, execution, evaluation, success, more, failure, move on. It's the same. I think the same thing works everywhere in the world.
We have a culture in India where we do not celebrate failure. We only celebrate success. And I'm not suggesting we celebrate Dr. Manmohan Singh. But coming back to failure and risk-taking and idea, don't you feel like turning an entrepreneur with so much happening in India?
Are you giving me a job?
No, I'm sure you can get a job on your own, but I'm talking about being an entrepreneur. Don't you feel like jumping in, starting something of your own? Because
many
from
times.
talking to you, it believes you're very entrepreneurial, and also you believe in the opportunities that are being created in India. So our last discussion was about brand Bharat. Rajesh and Kamal talked about that. genuinely, don't you think about being an entrepreneur? I know in your leadership role, you have to be entrepreneurial. You're investing new money, you're investing in new ideas, so you are entrepreneurial in that sense. But becoming an independent entrepreneur.
Yeah, why not? Absolutely. As you can imagine, after a 22-year boring bureaucratic stint, I find it very difficult to get out of my comfort zone. But of course, if there's something interesting and, I believe that I can add value, I can basically, bring my ideas to deliver something that people want, that'll basically generate money, why not? I'm not as old as you make out to be. Maybe there's another 20 years to go, so why not? Definitely at some time.
Fantastic. Initially, you were talking about how mobile commerce will grow, how from 0.3% we'll go to 5-6%, how China has done it. Looking at the valuation of e-commerce companies, do you think their business model is sustainable? Of course, e-commerce is here to stay, m-commerce is here to stay. What do you think about what's happening in the e-commerce space in India?
It's a phase of incredible growth, right? I mean, there's basically a lot of money chasing at this stage, a lot of ideas. It will stay like this, in my opinion, for some time. I don't think it's a bubble. I definitely think that there is basically some strong business models that will emerge, but between now and then, there will definitely be a shakeout, right? So I don't expect...
So there will be big winners and big losers.
There will be huge winners, and there will be many, wayside, basically, victims. I think there are two things that are, going to be successful. Also, as consumers and as shoppers, online shoppers, you will get to see yourself, what works and what does not. One is big scale, national, international marketplaces. We have 2 or 3 in India already. The other is hyper-local, right? Which is basically, it's okay for 40 of us to succeed in more or less in the same space, the same product concept area, provided I have my geographic, territory that nobody else can come to. So I'm a great home delivery, bakery in Gurgaon. I could survive, and so could the guy in Noida, and so could the guy in Faridabad, right? But then it's hyper-local. It's really a solution that is basically restricted, to a small area. The third space is aggregators, right? Which is suddenly when there are more than which you see, for example, cabs and so on and so forth. You might have a lot of services, but then one portal, one place where really, you can make choices and, get all of the advantages of whatever is on offer. That'll also be very successful.
I want to ask you the last question and really open up to the audience. Is there one person or more than one person you look up to, or somebody who inspires you, somebody you want to be like, or emulate some part of that person? And if there's one, would you like to share his or her name?
Wow. One, no, I don't, definitely not one. I mean, I am sure I can think of many, but I'm not going to name them, but, I think I'm inspired all the time by some of my friends, right? Basically, what we've turned out to be, not me, but, they've turned out to be from being, just young boys and girls that really had, wanted to have fun, to being very clearly focused on what they want to do, picking a thing that they really wanted to do well, and making sure then that they were the best at it, right? So, I mean, if anything inspires me, I would just say that so many examples of success of people that I've grown up with, in many, many different ways, not just financially or in the corporate world, in many different ways. I always think that where there is a will, there's a way. Somebody is going to, choose a path and go down and make themselves successful. Is an inspiration every day,
Fantastic. On that note, I'd like to open the floor to the audience. We're clapping for you, so
for you as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
so any questions we can take, Subarna, depending on the time.
I'm glad, Anurag, that you mentioned about role models as your closing remark with Nitish, because I've always wondered, what are the kind of role models that we're actually creating? If we look at our generation, we look up, of course, very strongly to names like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, and closer home, I'd want to point out the fiasco as far as Oyo rooms is concerned. So really, it's a kind of element of street smartness that needs to be there for the entrepreneur. Is this the kind of role model for the future as well? You would want to comment on that?
You go first.
I think Indians, because we grow up in an environment which is basically hostile, and we go through rough and tough. So if you look at kids, a lot of people say if your kids grow up in India till the class 8, 10th, they really become rough and tough and they can survive anywhere in the world. So in that sense, yes, street smartness works. But I think in the phase that we are moving in, I think everything is becoming very nuanced. There is information. So I think being planned and being specific and being very nuanced is very, very important. So I think being street smart works till a point of time, but I think beyond a point it doesn't work. I think I was gonna ask him a question I didn't ask. I talked about the fact that Kodak had so many employees and Instagram had 55 employees, and today look at where Kodak is and where Instagram. In your business, we don't talk that much about innovation, product innovation. Tomorrow there could be some bio-organic product that comes and takes away the need for something that you do. I'm just saying hypothetically, not that I'm aware of a product like that. I'm saying I don't think you can be street smart about that. I think that can only happen if you really apply science, you calibrate. So I don't think being street smarter in the sense of being a business person helps in the kind of environment that we have. It's super competitive. You're dealing with multiple forces. So you have to be very nuanced. That's my view.
You have anything to add there, Mr. Kapoor?
No, I agree. I mean, I think basically just being street smart is not the only thing that's going to make you successful. Definitely there is, you have to have a good foundation. You have to be, dedicated. There's nothing without hard work. Street smart will help eventually. But it's not where you can basically start and make yourself a great career.
Yeah, on the contrary, these three names that I mentioned actually started out as being street smart and then went ahead, like you earlier mentioned also, how brands should actually have a core purpose. Maybe that's what kind of helps build it, yeah? Questions from the audience, please?
My name is Subhash Goel. I'm in the tourism and travel industry. For building a brand, what are the 5 important things in point form would you suggest to any of the young entrepreneurs or CMOs who are here?
I'll start with purpose, right? It's something that we spoke about, which is, I think the first thing is, why do you exist, right? What is it that people are going to miss if you're not there? So definitely purpose. The second is, in spite of what you said, is continuous innovation. So your innovation, may not be quantum, it may be incremental, but if you're not refreshing the brand, you're going to die, right? And actually, I would choose one third one, which is profitability. Marketers generally ignore this, or they don't believe that they're responsible for it. But unless you have a clear, profitable source of growth, you're not really going to invest behind either the purpose or the innovation. And to that extent, your brand is going to fail. So purpose, innovation, profitability, PIP, if that helps you in any way.
PIP, good. I would say spend with ABP News, spend with abpnews.com, spend with the regional channels. Other questions?
Yeah, my name is Asim. I'm from JK Group, and thank you for a very knowledgeable session with you, sir. Can you share some consumer insight, which during the course of your professional relationship with Bankiser, which has surprised you? Or can you share something with us?
I'm sure there were many. From the top of my head, I really can't remember one. It'd be quite boring. I mean, I can tell you, for example, something recent. Again, maybe it's an example that will be a little more exciting, is this whole sexual well-being space in India, right? The insight about generally people not wanting to have this conversation and wanting to basically, hide when this conversation was happening. The insight amongst basically really young kids, okay, not kids, basically 14 to 18-year-olds about really wanting to know, anything about sex. We did this great thing with MTV last year, which was about basically having conversations with 14 to 17-year-olds on, being sexually active, and the amount of engagement that really young people have without embarrassment was maybe, an insight that I would not have expected.
Thank you.
One thing he told me, I can let the bag out of the cat out of the bag, is he told me they thought that Indians were having sex 3 times a week, but it's 16 times a week.
So the average is completely skewed by Anurag.
Yeah, right. By the way, we are referring to you, Mr. Pandey, right? That's what skewed the... Any other questions before we really move on? Last question we can take.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Prerna. I am from Fortis Healthcare. You are a young, inspiring, and a successful leader. What is it that you do to stay grounded?
So, by the way, being married keeps you below ground, not grounded, right? So what keeps me grounded, really, I would say, is a clear realization that there are really lots of smart people that you can learn things from every day, no matter how senior you are, right? If you really, wow. Clearly that went down well. But I would say the day you don't learn anything new from somebody else is the day you should turn an entrepreneur and go somewhere else, right? Because if you keep your eyes and your ears open, you will always get something that you would never have thought of yourself. I guess that's what just keeps me grounded. And I like then to go and get it, right? Which is to go and talk to many different people to see whether I can, get a perspective that I don't have. And that works for me generally.
And just to he's come from the FMCG business. 2 years back, I was in a similar conversation with the MD of Levers in India. And he talked about market visits. He said to me, Anurag, I still make, he gave me a number, it was a large number, I can't remember, and I won't make it up. But he said, for me, that's more consumer insights, but not in the sense of you, in terms of leadership that you asked it. But he said, for me, market visits are very important. He talked to me about how he goes to villages still to figure out. So I think...
Yeah, I mean, that's one way of, connecting. So market visits, consumer visits. You're really not going to find time for them every day, but when you can, of course.